So great news. Your PPP loan was approved. The money has hit your bank account. And now if you are like most people, you are freaking out a little bit because you want to be sure that this turns into a forgiven loan, not a loan that you have to end up paying back. Hi, I'm lawyer Autumn Witt Boyd. I am an attorney in Tennessee and an expert in helping online businesses protect their brand, their content, and their business. I'm coming to you today. This is Wednesday, May 13, and this area is evolving quickly. So if you're watching this a bit later, maybe check back and make sure that we haven't put out another video in the interim. But I want to talk with you today about making sure that your PPP loan is forgiven, not that you have to end up paying it back. Let's dive in. The first thing I want to mention is that your lender, so either the bank or other financial institution that you got your PPP loan through, they are the ones who are going to evaluate whether you qualify for forgiveness. So your first step should be to check with them and see if they have any requirements for the paperwork that you need to be keeping. Some of them I've seen actually have their own spreadsheets that they're asking you to use to kind of keep track of how you're spending the money. So check with your bank first. Not all of them have this. I inquired with my bank that I got my PPP loan through, and they basically said, good luck. We have nothing helpful for you. But some lenders are going to have specific requirements. So check with your lender first, and it may be different for different banks. So just because your friend is using, such and such form or doing it one way, that may be because their bank has recommended that. Your bank may have a different rule. So this may vary by lender. But most of this should be generally applicable. So the first thing is you want to be sure that you spend it on the right things. There are 4 main categories. So the first is payroll. That includes salaries, wages. If you have paid vacation, paid family or parental leave, paid medical or sick leave, that qualifies. And also health and other retirement benefits for your employees. Keep in mind that the maximum amount of annual salary that you can pay to any single employee is $100,000. And then they're going to split that by 52 into 52 weeks. So the maximum amount you can pay any one person over the 8-week period that you have to spend your money is $15,384. So make sure when you're running payroll that you're not paying any single person more than that amount. That is the max per person. Now, the rule is you have to use at least 75% of your total loan amount on this group of payroll expenses. You can use the other 25% on the other things we're going to talk about. Now, you can use more than 75% on payroll. You can use 100% on payroll if you want, but you have to use at least 75% of the loan amount on payroll if you want it to be forgiven. Now, if you're self-employed or if you're an owner, so you're not on payroll, I fall into that category. You can still pay yourself. That is allowed. That is going to be calculated based on your prior Schedule C income. So you're going to take that amount and divide it by 52. If that amount is line 31 on your Schedule C, it's basically your profit. If that amount is over $100,000, you're going to reduce it to $100,000, and congratulations, you are capped out at that $100,000. So the maximum you can pay yourself is that same $15,384. Now note, this payroll amount does not include contractors. So if you have someone who you issue a 1099 to, they are not an employee on payroll, you cannot use your PPP money to pay them if you want it to be forgiven. You might be able to use it, what we'll talk about at the end, but it's not going to be forgivable if you are paying contractors. The second category of expense that you can use your PPP money to pay is mortgage interest. So it's not the principal, and this is if your business has a mortgage. This is not your personal mortgage. If your business owns a building and you have a mortgage on that, you can pay the interest over that 8-week period, but not the principal, as long as you had that mortgage before February 15, 2020. So all of these amounts had to be in effect before February 15, 2020. Alternatively, if you don't own a building, but you rent your office space, you can pay your rent as long as you had that lease agreement in place before February 15, 2020. You can also pay utilities as long as the service began before February 15, 2020. And I have not seen exact language on what is considered a utility, but It's going to be your normal things that we think like gas, water, electric, internet, mobile phone, anything kind of outside that basic group of utilities, I think may be suspect. I'm an attorney, so we pay for legal research. I saw a question asking if that could be considered a utility. I don't think that things like that are going to count. I think they're thinking, water, air, heat, those kinds of things are what we think of as utilities. So those are our 4 categories: payroll, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. Those are the only things that you can spend this money on if you want it to be forgiven. The next thing I want to talk about is that you only have 8 weeks to spend all of your PPP money if you want it to be forgiven. And that starts the day the money hits your account. So it's not the date you signed the promissory note. It's not the date you filed your application. It is the date the money actually lands in your account. And you are supposed to be using it on expenses incurred within that 8-week period. Now, this is where it gets really messy. I don't know about you, but I pay rent once a month. I pay payroll once a month. Some people do twice a month or every other week. But so that 8-week period may not perfectly align with 2 rent payments or 2 payroll cycles or however many payroll cycles. Your utilities may be due at different points over the month, as mine are. So this is where it's a little messy. We don't have official guidance on this. So this is just kind of best practice. This is our best guess. We don't have official guidance on it. But what I am seeing is that it is recommended not to prepay. So you can but it might be okay to delay payments and pay late. But what I have seen recommended, the most conservative way to look at this is only make payments after that money hits your account. So for example, I typically run payroll by about the 5th or 6th of the month so that my employees can get paid by the 10th. It takes a couple days for the payroll processor to push it through. I received my PPP loan on the 8th of this month. I had already paid payroll because I didn't want to wait and make my employees wait. So I can't now count that payroll that I paid on the 6th if I didn't get my money until the 8th. So now we're going to have to do some creative figuring out some math on the back end to make sure that we spend it all during that 8-week period. I may change the timing of payroll at the end. We may move to weekly so that we make sure that we're spending the money and not, waiting and having our last payroll period be outside that 8-week period. So this is where it's a little bit tricky, but it looks like the safest thing to do is not to count any payments that were made prior to the day that you received your funds, even if they cover expenses that fall within that 8-week period. So like for your rent, you're paying for the whole month, but if you paid before that money hit your account, that is a little bit of a question mark. We may receive guidance on this, so stay tuned. But as I'm planning it out, I'm trying to take the most conservative approach because I don't want to have to pay this money back. So the next thing to be aware of is things that you could do that could reduce the amount that is forgiven. So the first thing is you are required to maintain your head count. You are supposed to have the same number of full-time equivalent employees. Now, this can be tricky if you have a mix of part-time and full-time employees, and it really is going to vary depending on how many hours each one is working. So I cannot give you a one-size-fits-all answer. I will say if this is you and you have reduced your head count, you should speak with an attorney or an accountant about this and make sure that you're doing things the right way if you're really concerned about getting your loan forgiven. Now, the date to look at for when does your head count matter? There's 2 ways to look at it. So it's either you're going to look at the average employment over the same time periods that you used for your payroll costs. So look at whatever period you used when you submitted your application for the PPP loan. For me, they required me to just look at 2019, but I've seen some other banks that were doing kind of a February 1 to January 31. There were different time periods. So that is one time period you can use. And again, that may vary by lender on what time period they were using. Or you can look at the average number of employees per pay period in the 12 completed calendar months prior to the date of your loan application. If your business was not operational for a full calendar year, then you're going to look at the average number of employees for each of the pay periods that the business was operational. So we don't have, February 15 is the date for this one. It's going to vary a little bit. But it's important to know that you have until June 30 to rehire anyone that you laid off after February 15. So if you had a drop in headcount because of COVID-19, you have until June 30th to rehire them and you won't be penalized. And we have a new rule that came out earlier this month. If you offer to rehire someone and they say no, they're not going to hold that against you. So even if your headcount is down a little bit, but it's because you did offer to rehire and they said no, then you're okay. You're probably going to want to document that on paper, both the offer and the no thank you. Now, the next reason that you might have your forgiveness amount reduced is if you reduce anyone's pay level. So you are supposed to be maintaining salary level. You can reduce it a little bit, but if they drop to less than 75% of their prior pay, you're going to have a little bit of a reduction in the amount of your forgiveness. Now, remember that when you applied for your PPP loan, you had to make a certification that the loan was necessary. I did a longer video last week about this because there's been a lot in the news about large companies with plenty of money taking out PPP loans that maybe weren't really necessary. So we have gotten some guidance on that. You have to certify in good faith that the current economic uncertainty made the loan request necessary to support your ongoing operations. And now they are going to look at your other sources of liquidity. So do you have a bunch of cash in the bank, or do you have a credit line that's open, or banks that are falling all over themselves to lend you money? They are going to look at that now. So be sure that you feel confident that you meet that necessity language. And if you haven't already, it's probably worth sitting down and running some numbers to see, forecast your revenues for your business, maybe 6 to 12 months, and run some different scenarios depending on if your revenues are already down a little bit, what happens if they drop more, what happens if you take out the line of credit and then you need it later and it's not available. You want to run those numbers and document that and have that in your file in case you do get audited later and there's a question about whether your loan was necessary. Now, what kind of paper trail are you going to need to keep for how you are spending this PPP money? We don't really know. We don't know what's going to be required, and it may vary by bank. But here are some good things to keep in mind. So payroll reports from your payroll provider, so just showing how you are doing payroll during this period. Gusto is the payroll provider I use and a lot of online businesses use. They have a special report that they are making available, so that will be very easy to track. But note, it is not going to include your owner's compensation on that report if you're not on payroll. So like for me, I just usually transfer money to myself as, my salary, which is really an owner's distribution. That doesn't go through Gusto, so that's not going to be on report. So just remember, you may have to document that another way. Your payroll tax filings, your Form 941s may be requested. That's what gets filed with the government for your federal withholdings, your federal employment taxes. They may request income, payroll, and unemployment insurance filings from your state. Those can be included in that forgivable amount. The federal taxes cannot, but the state ones can. Your retirement or health insurance contributions, your documents from whoever runs those for you, showing that you made those contributions. And for interest on mortgage, for your rent, for your utility payments, you just want to keep all those papers. So if you have a bill, if you have a canceled check, if you just are making a transfer from your bank account, you want to make that in the memo line for the transfer so that you can easily show that. And you want those numbers to match up exactly. So I have seen some people saying that they are setting up a totally separate bank account to run the PPP money. That is not required, but if it would make it easier for you to track expenses, it's certainly an option. It's really up to you. If you are a company that has, in your general operating bank account, if you have 100 or more transactions a month, and it would be easier just to pull out you're probably going to have 10 or 15 PPP transactions. It's not a lot of, on just those 4 categories. You're not going to have a ton of those. So if it would be easier to have a separate account where it's just those transactions and you're not having to weed through all your other regular business expenses, then that's certainly an option. But it's not required. You're just going to have to show, by matching up the transaction in your bank account and the transaction, either a receipt, a bill, a canceled check, however you're going to show that you did use that money for that thing. And those amounts need to match. The last thing to know is you can use your PPP money for other business expenses. You're not limited to just these four, but if you use it for other business expenses, kind of your general operational expenses, it will not be forgiven. So at that point, it just turns into a loan at 1% that you can pay back over 2 years. So it's not the end of the world if it's not forgiven, but especially if you took a large amount that you were counting on being forgiven, we don't want any surprises. We want you to be forgiven in the amount that you're expecting to be forgiven. So the Small Business Administration has said that it will issue additional guidance on loan forgiveness. Who knows when? We are in the predicament of having to kind of build the airplane while we're flying it. So we're all, if you're like me, you've already gotten your PPP money. I can't really wait on SBA to tell me what I should do. I've got to go ahead and spend it because I've only got 8 weeks and that clock is ticking. So if you have questions about this for your business, we are advising clients on how to make sure that they are doing things the right way, to answer some of these questions that are a little trickier and require some analysis or some really specific information about your business. So feel free to go to the link below. You can contact us that way. We have lots more information about COVID-19 and the PPP program at that link. That's at our website, awbfirm.com. And just get in touch and we would be happy to help. I will talk to you guys again soon.